Jonathan Harley didn't realize he was dying at first. He realized it when he tried to move his leg, and couldn't feel it. The cave was completely silent. No signal, no light, no way out, just darkness. And the terrifying sound of his own breathing slowing down. Hours passed. No rescue, no hope. The billionaire who controlled empires was now trapped underground like he never existed. He screamed until his throat tore apart, but no one came. Then, through the darkness, he heard something impossible. Footsteps. Small footsteps, and a little girl's voice whispered, "Mom, he's still alive." Jonathan stopped breathing, because in that moment, his life was no longer his own. It had started as a simple expedition, a private helicopter, a remote mountain, a place Jonathan wanted to buy. Because that's what men like him did. They didn't visit places, they owned them. The pilot had warned him. The terrain is unstable. Jonathan ignored him. He always did, because warnings were for people without power. Now he lay alone in darkness. His watch still worked. 4 hours had passed since the collapse. 4 hours since the ground had opened beneath him. 4 hours since the mountain had swallowed him alive. His throat was dry. His hands shook. His thoughts began to change. Not about business, not about money, about survival. Something he had never truly understood before. He tried to crawl. Pain exploded through his leg. He screamed. The sound echoed, then died. Like everything else in that place, Jonathan's mind began to betray him. What if no one found him? What if this was where his life ended? Not in a boardroom, not in power, but in darkness. Forgotten. Hours turned into something worse. Time lost meaning. His body weakened. His confidence disappeared. His identity faded. He wasn't a billionaire in that cave. He was just a man waiting to die. Then he heard something. A sound. Soft, distant. Footsteps. Jonathan froze. His heart began to race. He forced his voice out. Help. Silence. Then the sound again. Closer, closer, a voice, a woman's voice. Did you hear that? Jonathan's heart exploded with hope. He wasn't alone, not anymore. At first, Jonathan thought he was imagining it. His mind had already begun to betray him once. It could do it again. He held his breath, listened. There it was. Footsteps, light. Careful. Real, not echoes, not hallucinations. Someone was there. Hello? His voice cracked. Weak, foreign. He barely recognized it as his own. The footsteps stopped. Silence returned. Then a second voice, smaller, younger. Mum. I heard something. Jonathan's heart pounded violently. Not from fear, from hope. Hope was more dangerous than fear. Hope could disappear. Fear stayed. A faint light appeared in the distance. A flashlight, weak but real. Jonathan raised his arm. It trembled uncontrollably. Here. The light moved closer, revealing shapes. A woman, and beside her, a little girl. The woman froze when she saw him. Her eyes widened, not in recognition, in shock, because the man in front of her didn't look like a billionaire. He looked like a corpse that hadn't realized it was dead yet. The girl held tightly to her mother's hand. "Is he alive?" she whispered. The woman stepped closer cautiously. Jonathan saw her clearly now. Her clothes were worn, simple, her hands rough, her face tired, but her eyes were strong. She crouched beside him, placed her hand near his mouth, felt his breath. "Yes," she said softly, "he's alive." Jonathan wanted to cry. Not from pain, from relief. "What happened to you?" she asked. Jonathan tried to answer. Rock collapsed, his voice faded. His strength disappeared with every word. The woman looked at his leg, swollen, broken, badly. She understood immediately. He wasn't getting out alone. The girl stepped closer, her small voice filled with concern. "Mum, we can't leave him here." The woman hesitated. Jonathan saw it in her face, the calculation, the risk. Helping him would cost her something, time, energy, possibly everything. People like her couldn't afford risks. Jonathan knew that world. He had built it. "Please," he whispered. It was the first time in his adult life he had begged anyone for anything. The woman looked into his eyes and saw something unexpected. Not power, not authority. Fear. Human fear. The kind money could never erase. She made her decision. "We'll help you." Simple words, but to Jonathan, they meant life. The girl smiled faintly, as if she'd expected nothing less. The woman spoke firmly. "My name is Alina." She pointed to the girl. "This is Sophia." Jonathan swallowed. His lips trembled. Jonathan, for the first time, his name meant nothing. And everything. Alina stood, studied the cave. The exit was far, the path unstable, dangerous, but she didn't hesitate. Because she understood something Jonathan was only beginning to learn. Survival didn't belong to the strongest. It belonged to the ones who refused to leave others behind. "We need to move you," she said. Jonathan nodded weakly, trusting a stranger with his life, because he had no other choice. And for the first time in his life, control didn't matter. Only survival did. Alina knew immediately that moving him would not be easy. Jonathan wasn't just injured, he was heavy, dead weight. The kind of weight that didn't belong in a place like this. He wore expensive clothes, now torn and dirty. Clothes that had never known struggle. Clothes that had never known caves. Alina turned to Sophia. "Hold the light steady." Sophia nodded seriously. Her small hands trembled slightly, but she didn't complain. She didn't ask questions. Because children who grew up in hardship learned early that survival didn't wait for comfort. Alina crouched beside Jonathan. "Listen to me," she said calmly. "We're going to move you. It's going to hurt." Jonathan gave a weak nod. He had already accepted pain. Pain meant he was still alive. Elena wrapped his arm over her shoulder, lifted. Jonathan screamed. The pain in his leg exploded violently. His vision went white. His body tried to shut down. "Stay with me," Elena said firmly. Her voice was the only thing holding him in the world. He focused on it, not the pain, not the darkness. Her voice, step by step, slow, careful, unbreakable. They moved. Sophia walked ahead, lighting the path. Elena carried a man whose world weighed more than his body ever could. Jonathan felt shame, not because he was weak, but because he had never understood strength until that moment. Strength wasn't power. Strength was sacrifice. Minutes felt like hours. Every movement was war. Every breath was earned. Jonathan drifted in and out of consciousness. Each time he faded, Elena pulled him back. "Stay with me," not as an order, as a promise. Finally, light, real light, the cave exit. Jonathan felt cold air touch his face. Freedom. He collapsed to the ground outside. His body couldn't continue, but his mind stayed awake. He watched Elena. She was exhausted, breathing heavily. Sweat covered her face, but she didn't complain. She simply sat beside him, watching. Protecting, ensuring he stayed alive. Sophia stepped closer, her small face filled with concern. "Are you going to die?" she asked softly. Jonathan didn't know how to answer, because hours ago he had. He looked at her. "No," he said finally, not as truth, as decision. Elena spoke after several minutes. "There's a small house nearby." Jonathan looked at her. "We can't leave you here." The words were simple, but they changed everything. She didn't know who he was. She didn't know what he owned. She didn't know his power. She only knew he was human, and that was enough. The journey to the house was slower, harder, but Jonathan remained conscious longer now. He watched everything: the mountain, the path, the sky, things he had never truly seen before. Because before, he had never needed to. When they finally reached the house, Jonathan felt something unfamiliar. Safety. Not the artificial safety of wealth. Real safety. The kind built by people who protected each other, without contracts, without payment, without reason. Elena helped him inside, placed him on a simple bed. The room was small, fragile, but alive. More alive than the mansions Jonathan had owned. "Rest," Elena said. Jonathan looked at her. "Why are you helping me?" Elena didn't answer immediately. She adjusted the blanket carefully. Then she said something he would never forget. "Because someone should have helped you. Not because he was rich. Not because he was important. Because he was human." That night, Jonathan didn't sleep peacefully. He dreamed of falling, of drowning, of losing everything. But each time he woke, he wasn't alone. Elena was there. Sophia was there. Reality was there. And reality had given him something his old life never had. a second chance. Jonathan woke up to the sound of wind against thin wooden walls. For a moment, he didn't know where he was. His body was warm, safe, alive. Then the pain returned, sharp, precise, real. His leg was wrapped in cloth, carefully done, not professionally, but intentionally. Someone had taken the time. Someone had cared. He turned his head slowly. The small house was quiet, simple, fragile, but full of something his old world had never given him. Presence. He tried to sit up. Pain stopped him. His body reminded him that survival wasn't finished. It had only begun. Footsteps approached. Helena entered the room. She carried a small bowl. Steam rose from it. Soup. She noticed he was awake. "You shouldn't move yet," she said calmly. Jonathan watched her. "You stayed." Helena gave a faint shrug. "You needed help. Not you owe me. Not you're lucky. Just truth." He looked around. "Where is this place?" "El Refugio," she said. Jonathan frowned slightly. He'd never heard of it, because men like him didn't see places like this. They only saw land value, opportunity, ownership, never life. Sophia entered quietly behind her mother. She smiled when she saw Jonathan awake. "You didn't die," she said. Jonathan almost smiled back. "Not yet." Days passed. Jonathan grew stronger slowly, not fast enough for his mind, but faster than his body believed possible. He listened more, observed more, learned more. He watched Helena work. She woke early. Left, returned late, exhausted, still standing, still fighting, for survival. Not profit, not ambition, survival. One afternoon, Helena brought home an old radio. She placed it on the table, turned it on. Static filled the room. Jonathan didn't pay attention at first, until Halle Industries announces the permanent appointment of CEO Marcus Vance. Jonathan froze. His heart stopped. Marcus Vance, his business partner, his closest ally, his friend, or so he believed. Following the disappearance and presumed death of Billionaire, Jonathan stopped breathing. Disappearance, presumed death. Marcus had replaced him, already, too quickly, too easily. Helena noticed his reaction. "You know that name," she said. It wasn't a question. Jonathan didn't answer immediately, because answering would make it real. His life, his company, his identity, gone, not lost, taken. Helena studied him carefully. "You weren't just some man in that cave." Jonathan looked at her. For the first time since the cave, he told the truth. "I built everything." Helena didn't react with awe, or shock, or admiration. She reacted with understanding. "Someone wanted you gone, not asked, known." Jonathan nodded slowly. "Yes." Silence filled the room. Heavy, real, final. Jonathan realized something terrifying. The cave collapse hadn't been an accident. It had been opportunity. Marcus had known Jonathan would be alone, had known he would be vulnerable, had known he would die. Jonathan whispered, "He left me there." Elena didn't say, "I'm sorry." She said something more powerful. "Then you survived for a reason." Jonathan looked at her. "What reason?" Elena answered calmly, "To decide what happens next." That night, Jonathan didn't sleep. Not from pain, from clarity. His old life was gone. His company was no longer his. His name was already being erased. He had two choices: disappear or return. Not as the man he was, but as the man who survived death. Outside, the mountain stood silent. It had tried to take him. It had failed. And now, Jonathan Hale understood something he never understood as a billionaire. Survival was power. Not money, not control, not influence. Survival. Jonathan stopped thinking like a billionaire. That was the first thing that changed. Before the cave, every problem had a solution that could be bought. Now, survival had taught him something else. Solutions had to be earned. His body healed slowly. Each day he forced himself to move, at first only standing, then walking, then stepping outside the house. The mountain no longer looked like something he could own. It looked like something that had judged him and allowed him to live. Elena watched him carefully. "You're going to leave," she said one morning. Jonathan didn't deny it. "Yes." Sophia looked down. "Will you die again?" Jonathan walked toward her slowly, knelt. No, he didn't say it as hope. He said it as promise. Jonathan spent the next weeks preparing. Not physically, mentally. He thought about Marcus, their partnership, their trust. The way Marcus had watched him enter the cave that day. The way Marcus had insisted Jonathan go alone. The way Marcus had stayed behind, safe, prepared, waiting. Marcus hadn't saved him. Marcus had replaced him. One night, Elena asked him the question he had been avoiding. "What will you do when you go back?" Jonathan answered honestly, "I don't know yet." Elena looked at him, then decided carefully. Jonathan frowned slightly. "Why?" Elena's voice remained calm. "Because revenge can turn you into the same person who tried to destroy you." Jonathan understood. This wasn't about anger, this was about truth. Jonathan eventually left the mountain. Not in a helicopter, not with security. Not with power. He left as an ordinary man, invisible, unrecognized, alive. The city looked different now, louder, faster, colder. It hadn't waited for him, it hadn't missed him. It had replaced him, just like Marcus had. Jonathan stood across the street from Hole Industries, his building, his empire. His name was still there, but it didn't belong to him anymore. Not officially, not yet. He watched Marcus exit the building, confident, relaxed, untouched by consequence. Marcus believed Jonathan was dead. That belief was Jonathan's greatest weapon. Jonathan didn't approach. Not yet. He needed Marcus to feel safe, because safety created weakness, and weakness created opportunity. Jonathan began watching Marcus. His routines, his habits, his patterns. Marcus wasn't afraid, because Marcus didn't believe in ghosts. Jonathan found temporary work, simple work, invisible work. He built strength. He built patience. He built purpose, not for revenge. For balance. Weeks later, Jonathan made his first move. He sent Marcus an anonymous message. No name, no explanation. Only words, "I survived." Marcus read it late at night. His hands froze. His breathing stopped. His mind rejected reality. Because dead men didn't send messages. Dead men didn't come back. Dead men stayed buried. But Jonathan Haley wasn't buried. He had walked out of darkness, and Marcus would soon understand what that meant. Jonathan stood alone that night. Looking at the city, no longer as its owner, but as its judge, because Marcus had taken everything. But Marcus had made one mistake. He had failed to finish the job. Jonathan Haley had entered the cave as a billionaire. He left it as something Marcus could never control, a man who had already faced death and survived. Marcus Vance stopped sleeping the night he received the message. 2 words. "I survived." Nothing else. No number, no name, no explanation. But Marcus knew. Because there was only one man in the world who could send those words, and that man was supposed to be dead. Marcus replayed the memory again and again. Jonathan entering the cave. Jonathan disappearing. Jonathan never coming back. Marcus had waited, watched, done nothing, because doing nothing had been the plan, and now that plan had failed. Marcus increased security immediately. More guards, more cameras, more protection. But protection didn't remove fear. It confirmed it. Because protection meant he believed the threat was real. 3 days later, Marcus received another message, a location. No words, just a place, the cave. Marcus didn't want to go, but he knew he had to, because power meant nothing if fear controlled you. The cave looked the same, silent, unchanged, indifferent. Marcus stepped inside cautiously. The darkness swallowed him, just like it had swallowed Jonathan. For a moment, Marcus convinced himself it wasn't real. That Jonathan was still dead. That this was imagination. Then you should have finished it. Marcus froze. The voice came from behind him, calm, certain, alive. Marcus turned slowly. Jonathan stood there, stronger, unbroken, real. Marcus stepped backward. His voice trembled. "This isn't possible." Jonathan's eyes remained steady. "You left me here. Not accusation, truth." Marcus tried to recover control. "You were weak." Jonathan stepped closer. "No." A pause. "I survived." Marcus felt something he had never felt before. Powerlessness. Because money couldn't fix this. Influence couldn't erase this. Control couldn't stop this. Marcus asked quietly, "What do you want?" Jonathan answered calmly, "Nothing." Marcus frowned. Jonathan continued, "Because you already lost everything." Marcus didn't understand until he heard the sirens, police, authorities, consequences. Jonathan had exposed everything: Marcus's fraud, his betrayal, his attempted murder. Truth had replaced power. Marcus's empire collapsed within days, not through violence, through exposure, because truth didn't need force, truth needed time. Marcus lost everything: his company, his reputation, his freedom. He wasn't destroyed by Jonathan. He was destroyed by his own choices. Jonathan watched none of it, because revenge had never been his goal. Survival had been. Truth had been. Freedom had been. And now he had all three. Months later, Jonathan returned to the mountain, not as an owner, as a man. He walked the path slowly, not afraid, not angry, grateful, because the mountain had taken his old life and given him a real one. He walked to Elena's house, knocked. The door opened. Sophia saw him first. Her face lit up. "You came back?" Jonathan smiled. "Yes." Elena stepped forward, her eyes calm, certain. "You survived," she said. Jonathan nodded. "Yes, not as victory, as truth." Jonathan stepped inside. The small house hadn't changed, but he had. He was no longer the billionaire who believed he controlled the world. He was the man who understood the world could take everything and still leave you with what mattered most: yourself. Jonathan looked at Elena. "You saved my life." Elena shook her head gently. "You saved your own life." Jonathan understood now. Money hadn't saved him, power hadn't saved him, control hadn't saved him. People had, humanity had, truth had. Jonathan stayed. Not because he had nowhere else to go, but because he had finally found somewhere real. The cave didn't take his life. It took his illusion and gave him something far more powerful: the chance to become human again.